Hey guys, tonight we begin with a story that smells like jasmine, sounds like trickling water, and feels like cool tile under your feet. You're not in a spa. You're standing barefoot in the middle of a Persian garden, about 2,500 years ago. Around you, the desert stretches endlessly, beige and breathless. But not here. Here, you're surrounded by shady trees, soft breezes, and fountains so clear they make the stars jealous. And you didn't just stumble into this oasis. Someone made it, by hand, with picks, shovels, a fair bit of geometry, and centuries of stubborn brilliance. So, before you settle in and drift into this space, if you find yourself enjoying what you're hearing, take a moment to hit like and subscribe, but only if it truly feels worth it to you. And let us know in the comments where you're listening from, and what time it is where you are. Now, dim the lights a little. Maybe turn on a fan for a soft ambient hum, and let's begin tonight's journey gently together. You're walking through the dry heat of ancient Persia. The sun is high, but there's a breeze dancing in from the distant Zagros mountains. Your sandals kick up fine dust with every step. If you squint ahead, you'll spot a rectangular space, walls of mud brick enclosing something green. First, it looks like a mirage. You're not used to seeing green out here unless it's someone's jealous gaze. But as you get closer, you see trees. Real ones. Pomegranates, figs, maybe a few date palms swaying lazily. There's water, too. Not puddles or muddy trickles, but actual channels, clear and purposeful, flowing in straight lines like they have somewhere important to be. You step through a low archway, and the temperature drops. Not dramatically, but just enough to notice. Enough to make you sigh. Welcome to paradise. And no, that's not just poetic flair. The word paradise itself comes from an old Persian term, paradisa, meaning walled enclosure. Historians still argue whether it referred specifically to gardens or any kind of elite space, but Persian gardens certainly fit the bill. Enclosed, ordered, beautiful, and cool enough to keep your brain from turning into stew. Your eyes adjust. There's shade in abundance, nothing chaotic, though. This isn't some wild jungle bursting through stone paths. Everything here is deliberate. Trees are spaced with mathematic care. Waterways slice through in perfect angles. There's a reason for that. You've just stepped into a chahar bagh, a four-garden layout that divides space into quadrants with water channels at the center. The symbolic, spiritual, and frankly quite satisfying to look at. You stand at the cross of the four canals, and suddenly you feel balanced. Like your chakras are vaguely aligning even though you don't know where those are. This layout isn't just for show. It's rooted in Zoroastrian ideas of order over chaos. Earth, water, air, and fire each has a role. And in this garden, those forces are playing nice. The greenery tames the fire of the sun. The water cools the air. The walls block the wind. The earth holds it all together. Symmetry is peace. You didn't expect to be getting a philosophy lesson, but here we are. Then there's the sound. You listen, not just for birdsong or rustling leaves, but the subtle, ever-present trickle of moving water. It's not loud. It's almost shy, but it never stops. You follow one of the channels with your eyes and notice it disappears beneath the garden wall. That water has traveled for miles, possibly from underground tunnels dug through bedrock using nothing but hand tools, sheer calculation, and a belief that this whole thing was worth the trouble. Because here's the awkward truth. This lush slice of heaven, it's in the middle of a desert that really didn't want it to exist. But Persian gardeners didn't care. They looked at the cracked ground, the stinging wind, the relentless sun, and said, "Challenge accepted." You pause to touch the bark of a nearby cypress. It's cool, not cold, but enough to notice. There's a bench nearby, well, a slab of polished stone. You sit. The stone, surprisingly, doesn't burn your thighs. That's thanks to centuries of experience choosing the right kind of materials that radiate heat slowly. You didn't know you needed heat-resistant architecture for a nap, but these people did. Nearby, a gardener passes by, barefoot, in a loose cotton robe, carrying a curved spade. He doesn't look rushed. He pauses to adjust a flow channel by shifting a single rock. The water changes direction slightly. That's irrigation Persian style. No pipes, no pumps, just physics and patience. Quirk of the day? Some scholars believe these early Persian gardens may have served not just as rest stops, but also as spiritual training grounds, a sort of early mindfulness retreat. We must plant the soul as we plant the garden, says a proverb you may or may not be making up, but honestly, it fits. You breathe in. The air smells like roses, real ones, with actual scent. You lean back. Somewhere, a bird chirps like it's got gossip. Somewhere else, a butterfly has a minor existential crisis over which flower to land on. You close your eyes, and for the first time in what feels like a long time, you realize this garden doesn't just exist in the desert. It's winning. You're still seated on that stone bench, though your muscles have softened and your breath has slowed. The air smells faintly of wet soil now. Someone must have redirected a stream somewhere behind you. You open your eyes slowly, and the garden hasn't vanished. It wasn't a dream. It's still here, impossibly green against the relentless beige of the world outside. But step back a moment. This paradise didn't appear by magic. If you'd arrived a few decades earlier, this spot would have been sun-baked dust and brittle weeds. The desert, in its natural state, is patient, dry, and unapologetically harsh. It doesn't care about your aesthetic vision or your need for a shaded nap spot. The desert just exists, and it pushes back. The heat, brutal. Dry season highs can melt your resolve faster than your sandals. Soil salinity, unforgiving. That's when water evaporates so fast it leaves salt behind. So much salt that it chokes plant roots before they can even dream of fruit. And then there's the wind. Oh, the wind. Not the poetic breeze from before, but dry, hot gusts that scour the skin off anything that dares to grow upright. Now imagine you're a gardener here. Not in a theoretical sense, actually imagine it. You're wearing a linen shirt soaked through at the collar, and you've been digging trenches since dawn. Your fingers are cracked. Your lips are cracked. Honestly, your whole attitude is probably cracked. And for what? To move water, just a little of it, from wherever it hides underground to the patch of land you're trying to coax into bloom. Historians still argue whether Persian agriculture was born more out of need or religious philosophy. Some say the people were forced to innovate because the land gave them no choice. Others insist it was a sacred calling, to turn barren earth into divine order. Either way, it wasn't easy. The desert was the first boss fight, and it was on hard mode. One tactic? Build raised beds and border them with stones. These beds weren't just pretty outlines. They protected roots from runoff, trapped moisture, and stopped wind from blasting the topsoil away. Another trick. Mulch, but not the kind from your weekend gardening shop. Here, they used straw, clay shards, even animal dung. Glamorous? No. Effective? Absolutely. Now take a slow stroll with me across a stretch of earth just outside this garden wall. The soil here has been mixed, turned, and tested over and over. You step on soft mounds and feel the difference. Some parts sink gently. Others are springier, like the ground remembers being loved. Your guide points to a funny-looking clump nearby. It looks like a pile of stones shaped in a long row, leading slightly downhill. That's not random. That's a juba, an early irrigation furrow. The stones help guide water while preventing evaporation. It's like the original plumbing system, one bucket at a time. Further off, you see another gardener crouched beside what looks like a mud channel. He's pressing his fingers into a wooden wedge, letting the water decide which way to flow, toward the trees or toward the melons. He's not shouting or racing. Everything here moves slowly, thoughtfully. It has to, because if you're reckless, you lose water. If you lose water, the garden dies, and then the desert wins. Quirky fact of the hour? Some early Persian texts treated gardeners like sages, guardians of balance. In one legend, a gardener refuses a king's command to divert water from the village fields to fill palace fountains. His punishment, banishment, his legacy, a proverb about not stealing a drink from thirsty roots. Possibly apocryphal, still wise. You notice a tree stump nearby, flat, polished. It's been there for years, used as a resting spot for workers. You sit on it, and the grooves of 1,000 past hands seem to press back gently into your palms. It's a good place to rest, a quiet place to reflect. A flock of birds bursts from a nearby tree, startled by a breeze, or maybe just gossiping again. You look up. Above the mud brick walls, the sky is enormous. Not just wide, but impossibly open, like the whole universe decided to press pause right here. And it's funny, isn't it? In a world that offers so many fast things, fast talk, fast food, fast exits, this garden was built on the slowest principles. Soil takes years to become rich. Trees take decades to bear. Water takes patience to move. And shade? Shade is a gift earned only after years of nurture. You don't just inherit paradise. You build it, rock by rock, root by root. The wind shifts again. It's cooler now. Not cool like mountain air, but cool enough to remind you that someone, long ago, made a promise to the land and kept it. You're walking now, slowly. The kind of slow that only happens when you've got nowhere to be and everywhere to feel. Your fingers trail along the top of a low stone wall as you follow a narrow channel of water that snakes alongside your feet. It murmurs as it moves, like it's sharing secrets from centuries ago. Probably about irrigation, but possibly about something more poetic, depending on your mood. That water, clear, purposeful, and impossibly cool, didn't appear by luck. It was summoned, and not just from any nearby stream or river because, spoiler alert, there aren't any. You're in the middle of an arid zone. Surface water here is rare, seasonal, and usually inconvenient. But someone, long before you ever arrived, decided that underground was the way forward. Welcome to the world of the Cannet. It starts with a mountain. That part's important. A real mountain. Not a hill or a nice bluff, but something tall enough to collect snow in the winter and hold water in its bones. Persian engineers, centuries before anyone had access to Google Earth, figured out that water slowly seeps down through rock layers beneath those peaks. And if you dig just right, you can catch it. The trick? You don't dig straight down. You dig sideways, for miles. Gently sloping tunnels, called cannets, cut through rock and soil at a precise angle. Just steep enough for gravity to pull the water along, but not so steep that it erodes the channel. Too shallow? No flow. Too deep? You drown your workers. This is desert calculus. You spot one now. A small round hole in the earth off the path, ringed with stones and shaded by a lonely shrub. That's a vertical shaft part of the Cannet system. These shafts were spaced every few dozen meters to help diggers access the tunnel, remove debris, and breathe. Yes, breathe. Working in a Cannet wasn't glamorous. It was hot, dark, and full of stale air. Claustrophobia was included at no extra charge. You kneel beside the opening and peer down. You can't see the end. It's a long vertical drop into darkness, like the desert has a secret underworld. You listen. There's no echo, just a muffled drip. Somewhere down there, water is flowing silently toward the surface, toward this garden, toward you. Historians still argue whether cannets were a purely Persian invention or an adaptation of even older Mesopotamian and Egyptian technologies. But one thing's clear: nobody perfected them like the Persians did. At their peak, some cannets stretched over 50 kilometers long. That's not a typo. 50 kilometers, dug by hand, with no GPS, no dynamite, just labor, experience, and an excellent sense of slope. Quirky side note: in some regions, children were trained to listen to water. They'd lie flat on the ground, ear to the soil, and identify whether a cannet was flowing properly based on pitch and rhythm. Basically, ancient acoustic engineers in dusty tunics. You rise to your feet and follow the water further down the garden. It enters through a small sluice gate made of wood and stone, then breaks into branches, some leading to trees, some to basins, some to tiny ornamental streams that serve no purpose other than beauty. Which, of course, is a purpose. This idea that something can be useful and beautiful at the same time is woven into every leaf, every pebble, every rivulet here. Persian garden design didn't just solve problems. It made the solutions poetic. You approach a corner where a square pool mirrors the sky. In the center, a small bubbling fountain stirs the surface. Nothing dramatic. No high sprays or dolphin statues. just a gentle burble. It exists not to impress, but to calm. The sound distracts your brain from the silence of the desert. The motion cools the air. The water invites reflection, in every sense. You lean over and see your own face ripple on the surface. Slightly distorted, a little sleepier than expected. You imagine a gardener here centuries ago doing the same, wiping sweat from his brow, wondering if the pomegranates will fruit this year, hoping the next generation remembers which stones control which streams. Behind you, a lizard darts across the sunlit wall. It pauses, flicks its tail, and disappears into a crevice. Even it seems to respect the design. Nothing lingers too long in this space without being part of its rhythm. You sit beside the pool, legs crossed, and close your eyes again. It's quiet, but not empty. The air carries layers: water, stone, the whisper of breeze through grape leaves. And beneath it all, like a heartbeat in the dust, the canet flows. You wake up slowly, not from a nap, but from that light doze your brain sometimes slips into when everything feels safe. The kind of rest that comes not from silence, but from soft, repeating sounds. Trickling water, rustling leaves, your own breath. You stretch your legs and rise, knees popping like you're much older than you admit. Time to move again. You follow a narrow path paved in flat stones, warm but not scorching. Trees form a loose canopy overhead. Sunlight filters through in scattered bursts, like it's being generous. The air smells of earth and faint citrus. A few bees hum lazily between flowers, conducting pollination business with absolutely no sense of urgency. You reach another open space, square, balanced, and strangely mathematical. If you had a ruler and some graph paper, you could probably map the whole thing perfectly. But you don't need to. Your body already feels the symmetry. This is no accident. This is the Chahar Bagh, the four-part garden design that defines Persian paradise. Two long water channels intersect at the center, forming a cross. For quadrants stretch out between them, each planted with different trees and shrubs. Not random ones, mind you. Each quadrant may symbolize a different season, a different element, a different verse in a sacred story. It's a garden, but it's also a book you're meant to read with your feet. The symmetry isn't just aesthetic. It serves a purpose. By dividing the garden evenly, water can be distributed precisely. Shade can be calculated. Breezes can be channeled. And, perhaps most importantly, order is maintained in a world that often refuses to behave. Historians still debate whether the Persian garden's geometry was inspired more by Zoroastrian cosmology or practical irrigation needs. Either way, the result is the same. A space that feels too perfect to be accidental, too elegant to be merely functional. You pause at the central intersection. Each canal sparkles in the sun, flowing with perfect grace toward the corners of the garden. You step closer to one and notice the tiniest notches carved into the stone, manual flow regulators. You reach down and gently slide a flat rock. The water shifts direction with an obedient glug. Just a little, enough to make a difference in the nearest tree's mood. Nearby, a small sign, etched into stone and probably placed centuries ago, reads something like, "Do not trample the tulips," or maybe, "Beware of peacocks." Your Persian is a bit rusty. You stroll into one of the quadrants, where the layout becomes even more detailed. Rows of herbs grow in neat lines: mint, basil, saffron, maybe even a little hyssop if your nose isn't lying. These weren't just for scent or flavor. They were part of a medicinal pantry, a living pharmacy built right into the ground. Somewhere to your left, a gardener is pruning a bush with tiny scissors that look like they belong in a calligraphy set. He doesn't look up. He doesn't need to. This garden isn't designed for tourists. It's for those who already belong here. Now look down. The ground isn't just dirt. It's patterned gravel, often swept into decorative swirls. Some of it's crushed tile. Some is colored stone. Crunches under your feet softly, like polite applause. Every footstep you take adds a rhythm to the silence. And then you notice something strange. The air here feels cooler than the last section of garden you were in. Same sun, same wind, different sensation. You look up and see that the trees here are taller, their leaves broader. A few vines trail along a low pergola, casting stripes of shadow across the walkway. That's intentional. Each section of the garden is designed to have a slightly different microclimate. One corner might be drier for olive trees, another more humid for roses. Persian gardeners didn't just grow plants, they designed ecosystems, each tuned to the needs of its inhabitants. Quirky discovery of the hour? Some noblemen reportedly held tests to measure how evenly the garden's scent was distributed. Servants were stationed with silk cloths to waft air into corners and compare the strength of the fragrance. If it was too weak in one area, they'd replant, rewater, or even adjust the fountain height. Because apparently, in ancient Persia, even your breeze had performance reviews. You wander past a low wall where climbing roses spill in slow-motion waves. Their petals are dusky pink, the kind of shade that looks like it was mixed by a sunset. A cat, some combination of bored and holy, sleeps curled beneath them. Its ears twitch when you pass, but otherwise it does not acknowledge your existence. Fair enough. You step into another quadrant. This one's brighter, more open. Young trees, maybe citrus, spread their delicate fingers upward. The soil here is looser, more textured. It smells alive. You crouch and run your hand over it. Moist, cool, and speckled with something unexpected. Crushed brick? Maybe? That's on purpose. Old garden manuals mention adding pottery fragments to certain soils to help retain moisture and discourage pests. Nothing wasted. Everything repurposed. Even the broken things have a job. You rise again and stand at the center of the garden, where water flows in all four directions like veins. This space, symmetrical and deliberate, doesn't just nurture plants, it changes how you breathe, how you think, how you move. It's not just a garden. It's a kind of thinking. You've wandered to the edge of the quadrant now, where a stone step leads down to a sunken seating area. It's shaded by a trellis woven thick with grapevines, and the sunlight that does make it through paints shifting patterns on the cushions below. You sit, letting your hands rest on the worn tile, cool, slightly uneven, and the color of dried apricots. Across from you, a slender tower rises, narrow at the top, with open slats that face into the wind. It hums gently, like the garden itself is breathing. This, my friend, is a badger, a windcatcher, and it's one of the most quietly brilliant pieces of desert architecture you'll ever experience. The principle is simple. Tall towers channel breezes downward into living spaces or, in this case, garden courtyards. As the air descends, it cools. If it passes over a pool or a damp cloth, it cools even more. Voila, natural air conditioning. Centuries before anyone slapped the word eco-friendly onto a product label. You close your eyes and feel the breeze touch your face. Not a gust, just a polite suggestion of coolness. It slips past your ears, lowers your body temperature, and carries away some of the heat that's been lounging on your skin all morning. You let out a breath you didn't realize you were holding. This cleverness isn't new. Historians trace the earliest windcatchers to ancient Iran, possibly as far back as 3,000 years ago. But the Persian garden is where they were perfected. Builders aligned them based on prevailing winds, fine-tuning their angles to create circulation without fans, electricity, or modern science. All they needed was observation, and the stubborn conviction that the desert didn't get to have the final say. You rise again and walk toward the tower's base. A narrow shaft leads underground, and somewhere beneath your feet, cool air is drifting through stone corridors, gently making its way to the roots of pomegranate trees and thirsty vines. In some gardens, the windcatcher connects to a canet, and the airflow draws up moisture, turning the dry passageways into passive evaporative coolers. You're not just standing beside a building, you're inside a living machine. Quirky detail for the record? Some windcatchers were also used to trap and funnel warm air out of storage rooms where food or ice was kept. Yes, ice. In the desert. Stored in subterranean chambers called yakshals that could preserve winter's chill through the summer. They looked like giant beehives above ground. But below, they had deep pits packed with snow or ice harvested in winter and kept cold through ingenious insulation methods. It's like ancient refrigeration, but with more geometry and fewer humming noises. You stroll back out into the courtyard and notice how everything is arranged around the airflow. Plants that love heat cluster near sunny spots. Shade lovers gather where the breeze is strongest. The geometry of the garden and the technology of the windcatcher work together like musicians in a chamber ensemble, each one subtle, but perfectly in tune. You pass a gardener reclining under the shadow of a fig tree. He has a wide straw hat, bare feet, and a calm that suggests he knows the secrets of airflow and root systems better than most philosophers know themselves. He nods once as you walk past. In this space, no one hurries. And that's the point. These gardens weren't made to be rushed through. They were made to slow you down. Even the pathways, paved with slight undulations, require careful steps. Your mind starts to match the pace of your body. The slower you walk, the more you notice. The texture of a leaf, the curve of a carved archway, the sound of a fountain echoing faintly in a corner you haven't explored yet. Even the benches seem to invite you to pause. You notice one carved with geometric patterns, where travelers once rested during their journeys along the Silk Road. These gardens often doubled as caravanserai rest stops, safe, shaded havens where you could bathe, pray, eat, and repair your sandals while admiring the roses. Functional and philosophical, the duality of Persian design strikes again. And always the breeze, whispering through trees, curling around corners, catching your sleeve and tugging just enough to remind you it's there. Not loud, not showy, just essential. Historians still debate whether windcatchers were more common in gardens or homes, or whether their function was symbolic as well as practical. Some argue the towers represented connection between sky and soil, spirit and breath. Others say that's just poetic nonsense tacked on by modern romantics. Maybe both are true. Maybe none of it matters because in this moment, the air feels good on your neck, and that's enough. You step under a pergola covered in flowering vines, possibly jasmine, possibly something you'll Google later and forget just as quickly. The breeze passes through the blooms and brings their scent to life. You pause again. This isn't walking anymore. It's floating. A dragonfly hovers near a puddle left by an overflowing basin, its wings catching the light like stained glass. Somewhere behind a bush, a fountain gurgles with cheerful defiance, pushing water uphill with no visible effort. A bird calls once, then is quiet. It feels like everything is breathing in the same rhythm you are. And when you finally reach the far wall, where the sunlight turns golden and the stones radiate the warmth of the day, you realize the garden has been working on you this whole time, cooling your skin, slowing your thoughts, inviting you to feel something that modern life tends to strip away, peace that doesn't need permission. You turn a quiet corner of the garden, where the air suddenly smells like warm honey and crushed rose petals. The scent doesn't shout. It arrives like a whisper, gentle and layered. You pause and inhale. Somewhere nearby, a cluster of damask roses is blooming, their silky petals catching the sun like blushing silk. The bees are busy here, but even they seem to move slowly, buzzing politely from flower to flower like they know they're in a sacred space. This part of the garden is all about scent. You step onto a narrow path lined with flowering shrubs, jasmine, sweet basil, lilac, and maybe even a shy clump of saffron crocus peeking through. Every few steps, the aroma shifts. It's like walking through a perfume, one that was carefully blended by a gardener with a poet's soul and a chemist's precision. And that's not an exaggeration. The arrangement of aromatic plants in Persian gardens was deliberate, calculated, and deeply meaningful. Gardeners placed certain flowers near seating areas, others near water, some by doorways, and many beneath windows. Why? Because scent rises with heat, and they knew exactly how to use that to their advantage. You sit beside a shallow pool rimmed with blue tiles. The water reflects the hanging branches above, and as you lean in, a gust of breeze carries a blast of orange blossom. It's so sudden, so delicious. It's like you've been slapped by springtime. Turns out this wasn't just about aesthetics. The use of scent was strategic. Strong-smelling herbs like basil helped ward off insects. Certain flowers were thought to purify the air or carry spiritual symbolism. And during ceremonies, weddings, poetry readings, even moonlit banquets, the entire garden became a multisensory experience. Historians still argue whether the layering of scents had a codified meaning, like a language of plants, or whether it was a looser tradition. But there's no doubt the experience was designed. You weren't meant to just look at the garden. You were meant to breathe it in. You rise again and begin walking through a shaded archway covered in myrtle. A gardener passes you carrying a bundle of lavender tied with twine. He's humming something low and repetitive, and you realize it's not just the plants that make this place calm. It's the rhythm, the routine, the quiet intention. As you wander deeper, you come across a rectangular bed edged with terracotta bricks. Inside, the soil has been recently turned. Neat rows of small green shoots poke through, and there's a faint smell of fresh earth and mint. A woman kneels at one end, tucking seeds gently into the rows with her fingers. She doesn't look up, but she does shift slightly to make room for you to pass. You nod your thanks, though you're not sure she saw. Maybe she did. Maybe she didn't. Either way, it doesn't matter. You're beginning to realize that in a Persian garden, even your presence is part of the ecology. You're not just a visitor, you're another element. Another soul breathing the same scented air, walking the same stone paths that poets and rulers and caretakers once walked. You sit near a patch of violets. The smell is faint, but lovely, like a secret kept just for those who bother to notice. Your fingers brush the petals. Velvet soft, ephemeral, fragile. And yet these flowers return every year, bursting through hard earth like they never doubted they'd be welcomed. Quirky tidbit for today. In some Persian gardens, gardeners would crush fresh herbs into the tile joints between paving stones. Every time someone walked across, the pressure would release bursts of fragrance. Basically, nature's version of those fancy reed diffusers you find in overpriced hotel lobbies, except better, because it doesn't involve shopping. Nearby, a raised basin trickles water gently over its edge. The basin isn't just decorative. It amplifies the scent of the surrounding blooms by raising humidity and encouraging volatile oils to evaporate more richly. You never thought chemistry and poetry would meet so peacefully in a puddle, but here we are. You stretch your legs and lie back on the low bench behind you. Above, the sky is cut into neat squares by wooden latticework. Vines snake through the grid, their leaves fluttering like lazy green flags in the breeze. The light flickers, the air shimmers, and the scent, myrtle, basil, rose, water, layers around you like a lullaby. Somewhere in the distance, you hear a flute, or maybe it's just the wind singing through a hollow reed. Either way, you don't need to find the source. It's enough to know it exists. The garden was never meant to be understood all at once. It reveals itself in stages, first through sight, then through sound, and now through scent. A slow unfurling of paradise, like a scroll you read with your senses. You close your eyes again, not to sleep necessarily, just to feel, because in this place, even the air is trying to tell you something. When you open your eyes again, the sun has shifted ever so slightly. The garden glows differently now, warmer, richer, like someone turned up the gold dial on a dream. Shadows stretch longer across the gravel paths, and the leaves above you sway with a slow, deliberate grace. Everything has taken on the mood of late afternoon. Softer, quieter, more introspective. It's not time to leave, but it's certainly time to wander again. You rise and stretch, brushing the creases from your linen. A faint breeze catches your collar and nudges you toward another part of the garden. One that feels a little taller, a little shadier. The air is thicker here, with pockets of warmth between patches of shade, like walking through invisible curtains. This section is more vertical. Date palms reach upward in tall, defiant columns, their fronds flickering against the sun. Beneath them, grapevines sprawl horizontally, climbing across wooden trellises or draping themselves lazily over walls. It's a layered design, a vertical farm before anyone coined the phrase. And it's not just for show. In the harsh climate of ancient Persia, gardening wasn't just an art, it was a negotiation with nature. Space, water, and shade were all limited, so gardeners worked upward. They stacked plants by height, by need, by purpose. Tall palms provided shade for the mid-level fruit trees. Those trees, in turn, protected delicate herbs at the base. Vines climbed upward to make use of the air and light that the ground-level crops didn't reach. This clever layering meant more food in less space, and more beauty in every direction. Look up. Sunlight flickers through palm fronds. Look down. Clusters of mint and purslane huddle in the shade. Look ahead. Vines hang low enough to brush your shoulders as you walk. You pause to inspect a grapevine that's wrapped around a carved post. It's thick, gnarled, clearly older than most of your life decisions. A few underripe clusters hang lazily in the heat, still weeks from bursting into sweetness. There's something humbling about a plant that takes this long to give its gift. Quirky fact of the day: Persian gardeners sometimes painted their grapevines with diluted clay to protect the leaves from sunburn. Yes, plant sunscreen. Apparently, even your produce got pampered here. Some historical sources mention gardeners whispering to their vines while pruning. Part ritual, part superstition, part tenderness. Maybe it made the grapes taste better. Or maybe it just made the day go by with more joy. You continue on and pass a fig tree with thick, leathery leaves and fruits so heavy they bend the branches. One has fallen to the ground and split open. Its pink insides glisten like some forbidden treasure. A bee lands delicately, takes a sip, and flies off with no explanation. The irrigation system here is subtle but ever-present. A narrow channel runs alongside the wall, catching runoff from the upper garden and guiding it to the lower beds. Small gaps in the channel wall let the water trickle into the roots of specific plants. It's so precise it's surgical, and yet it's all done with stone, slope, and gravity. No electronics, no timers, just centuries of refinement and someone who remembered where every rock should go. You crouch near the edge of one such channel. The water is cooler here, probably fresh from the deeper part of the cannon. You cup a little in your hands and splash your face. The relief is instant. It feels like the garden just gave you a hug. Then, rising from the quiet, you hear a rustling. Not wind through leaves, but cloth. A gardener appears from around the corner, balancing a woven basket on one hip. Inside are early figs, green herbs, and what might be saffron threads laid out on a cloth to dry. He pauses near a small pomegranate tree, inspects a low-hanging branch, then walks on without a word. His presence is as effortless as the breeze. Historians still argue whether these vertical systems were truly innovations of necessity or refinements of earlier Babylonian techniques. But here, in this garden, such debates feel irrelevant. What matters is that it works. It's beautiful, and it still exists, both in memory and, occasionally, in carefully preserved ruins. You find a bench shaped like a crescent moon beneath a mulberry tree and sit again. From here, you can see 3 layers of life: the sky above, the canopy mid-level, and the ground cover at your feet. It's a microcosm of the entire garden: order, abundance, balance. The light is getting softer now, pooling like warm honey in the corners of the paths. Birds begin to call in a slower rhythm, and the breeze takes on that late afternoon mood. Less playful, more contemplative. You breathe in. The scent has shifted, drier now, with notes of bark, ripe fruit, and something faintly dusty. Time, perhaps. And as you sit there, surrounded by plants that know how to wait, how to grow, how to reach and rest all at once, you begin to feel it too. That strange, wonderful sensation that maybe you're part of something patient, something ancient, something rooted. The last of the day's harsh brightness begins to fade, and the garden slowly inhales. It doesn't make a sound, not really, but you feel it. The light thins, shadows stretch, and the air cools with the promise of evening. Somewhere in the distance, a night bird gives a cautious test call, like it's checking if the shift change has officially begun. You rise again, brushing the folds of your robe or shirt. It's hard to remember now what you're wearing. Everything feels timeless. You wander through a narrow, arched corridor flanked by thick stone columns. These aren't just architectural features, they're guardians. They hold in the coolness, guide the breeze, and cast dramatic lines of shade onto the path below. As the sun drops lower, those shadows begin to merge, and the garden transforms. You are entering the twilight zone. Not the creepy one, the magical one. As you step into the next courtyard, you notice something different. There are small terracotta oil lamps tucked into alcoves and set gently along the path edges. They're not lit yet, but someone has prepared them. A glass bowl of olive oil sits nearby, along with wicks twisted from soft cotton. Someone is planning for darkness, not to fight it, but to welcome it softly. The garden at night is not the same garden. It's another version of itself. Quieter, slower, scented differently. Cooler, of course, but also more introspective. It stops showing off and starts revealing things. You sit near a raised pool with a stone ledge and listen. The birds have quieted. Insects have taken over, but their subtle cricket pulses and tiny wing flicks, nothing disruptive. The water flows more quietly now, or perhaps your ears are adjusting. Either way, the night is beginning its shift. Quirky note for your brain to chew on. In many Persian gardens, nighttime was when the real social events happened. Not just casual walks, but poetry readings, music recitals, stargazing parties, and yes, romantic trysts if the mood struck. In fact, some gardens were designed to be appreciated more by moonlight than sunlight. The layout made use of reflection pools and pale stone to enhance natural nightlight. It wasn't about seeing more. It was about seeing differently. You glance around. Several small white stones have been set into the dark gravel paths in tiny patterns. Stars, maybe, or constellations. During the day, they're barely noticeable. At night, with the faint glow of the moon or lamp light, they come alive. It's like the sky has been invited to lie down with the earth for a while. You find a pillow left on a low bench under a cypress tree. It's embroidered simple, but elegant. Someone has thought about comfort. You settle in, back supported by stone and fabric, and let your head tilt toward the sky. Above you, grapevines frame the stars. They're just beginning to show. One here, another there. A few brighter ones fighting their way through the dusk. The breeze is cooler now, still gentle but with more purpose. It flows across the pool, across your arms, through your hair, like someone you trust brushing a hand across your shoulder without needing to say anything. And now the lamps begin to glow, not all at once. 1, then 2, then 4, then a few more, scattered like amber fireflies caught in clay. The flames are small, but steady. They don't flicker wildly. They dance slowly, like they know this isn't a rave. It's a lullaby. The scent has changed again. The sweetness of blooming night jasmine unfurls across the stones. A few roses that stayed tightly curled during the heat have begun to open, responding to the cooler air. The garden is exhaling. Historians still argue whether the nighttime use of gardens in ancient Persia was ceremonial, romantic, or spiritual. Likely, it was all three. There are records of astronomers using garden platforms to track stars. Poets composed verses in corners lit only by oil lamp and moon. Lovers met beneath trees whose branches knew how to keep a secret. And scholars, weary of scrolls and numbers, came here simply to feel human again. You close your eyes for a moment and imagine what it would have been like. A quiet procession of people, wrapped in soft cloth, carrying instruments or books or plates of figs, a flute in the distance, a whispered line of poetry, the glug of wine being poured, the sigh of a fountain. The pause between two words held longer than it needed to be. You are still, and the night wraps itself around you like a shawl. There's something about this place after sunset. It doesn't ask for attention. It just allows it. The garden under the moon becomes less of a spectacle and more of a companion. Less look at me and more rest with me. You lean back further. Let the stones support you. Let the vines frame your view. Let the night have you gently, because in a Persian garden at night, even silence is sacred. You wake, not from sleep exactly, but from that suspended moment where time folds over on itself. You'd leaned back to admire the stars, and somewhere between one breath and the next, the world became quieter. Now the garden breathes softly beside you. It's fully night. The lamps glow steadily. The stars above multiply, and the path before you shimmers faintly with moonlight and gravel. You rise, slowly, like someone surfacing from deep water. The air is cooler now, truly cool. Not the shy breeze of earlier, but a silkier chill that wraps itself around your skin. You draw your sleeves tighter and begin walking again, deeper into the garden's heart. This path is narrower, winding now, no longer bordered by open sky. Instead, the route turns inward, lined by curved walls and tall hedges that lean slightly, like they're listening. A soft sound rides the air. Not water, not wind, but music. You follow it. Around the bend, a small gathering place opens up. Intimate, enclosed, paved in tiles that reflect the lamps like a mosaic of stars. There are cushions arranged around a low platform. A woman sits cross-legged on the floor, plucking a setar, a traditional Persian string instrument, its voice quiet and clear like morning dew on stone. She doesn't see you, or maybe she does but doesn't mind. Here, presence isn't a performance. It's participation. Next to her, an older man reads quietly from a long scroll, pausing between stanzas. His voice is low, soft, and melodic. Farsi probably, though it might as well be water. The words ripple through the air, and even though you don't catch the meaning, you feel the rhythm, the pauses, the reverence. You sit at the edge of the circle, unseen or at least unacknowledged. And that's perfect. Here you are part of something ongoing. Not an audience, not a guest, just another breath in the quiet. Poetry was always a core part of Persian gardens. Historians have long noted that many of these spaces were not just for growing things, but for saying things. Poetry and gardens were intertwined, each feeding the other. The layout of the garden often mirrored the structure of a poem, symmetrical, deliberate, surprising in its turns. Even now, Persian love poetry is filled with garden imagery. Roses and nightingales, wine and pavilions, the lover as a flower, the beloved as the moonlight through trees, garden as metaphor, garden as mirror, garden as confession booth, and sometimes all three at once. The man pauses and sets the scroll aside. A child, not more than 10, steps forward shyly with a flute carved from pomegranate wood. He plays one short note, then another. The music isn't polished, is hesitant, but it's offered with sincerity, and the garden accepts it like it accepts everything else, without judgment. You turn your gaze upward. Above the hedges, the trees part just enough to reveal the stars in perfect clarity. No city lights out here, just cosmos. In ancient times, Persian astronomers would map the sky from gardens like this, using the stillness of water in reflecting pools to observe constellations. They believed the universe above mirrored the order they created below. The heavens, like the garden, obeyed geometry. Quirky side note for the dream lovers. Some texts suggest that certain plants were believed to be more spiritually resonant at night. Gardeners planted these blooms where moonlight would strike them first. It wasn't just landscaping, it was lunar choreography, a slow waltz between flower and cosmos. You wander again, quietly, leaving the music behind you. Another path leads toward a smaller chamber, a half-walled room open to the sky, with soft seating built into the stonework. A small pool glows there, lit from within by a submerged lamp. Floating on the surface are tiny candles, each nestled in the center of a flower. Some rose petals, some hibiscus. One flickers, another drifts toward you like a lazy thought. You sit and watch them for a long time. No one rushes you, no one speaks. The garden seems to know your pace. Historians still debate whether these night spaces were reserved for the elite or whether more common folk also wandered them under certain moons. But here, in this moment, that line doesn't exist. You feel neither royal nor ordinary. You are simply someone who wandered into the right place at the right hour. Eventually, a breeze moves through and nudges one candle toward the far wall. It touches the edge, flutters, and quietly dies. Another follows, and then a third. The pool becomes darker, its reflections deeper. It's as though the garden itself is dimming the lights, signaling the next act in its slow, moonlit drama. You rise once more and take the longest path back, the one that loops through the fig trees, past the date palms, alongside the citrus grove you remember from earlier. The fruits glow faintly in the lamplit dark, like forgotten suns still hanging in orbit. Their scent is sharper now, more mature, tart, real. You pause one last time beside a jasmine-covered archway and take a deep breath. The air fills your lungs like a blessing. This was no ordinary walk. This was a visitation. And somehow the night has made you softer. The path bends gently now, as if reluctant to leave the night behind. And maybe you feel the same. You move more slowly than before, not out of fatigue, but because everything has taken on a dreamlike weight. Each footstep feels considered, like the garden is pressing itself into your memory one tile at a time. You find yourself in a quieter part of the grounds, one that feels slightly older, slightly more forgotten. The walls here are worn smoother by time, and the plants grow more freely. Moss creeps along the edges of stone basins. A vine has overtaken part of an old column, coiling in silent triumph. It's not overgrown exactly, just softened, like this part of the garden is no longer performing. It simply is. This too is part of the design. The Persian garden was always meant to age gracefully. Nothing here fights time. It works with it. You take a seat near a dry fountain. Its basin empty now, but patterned with delicate blue tiles that catch the faintest light. The image at the center is chipped but familiar. Two peacocks facing each other, their tail feathers blooming into symmetrical spirals. It's beautiful, even unfinished. You close your eyes and imagine what the spot might have looked like when the fountain still ran. Maybe the peacocks shimmered in the ripple of the water. Maybe fish darted through their reflections. Maybe children splashed their hands here while their parents recited couplets under the canopy. Peacocks weren't just ornamental in Persian gardens. They were symbols of beauty, immortality, divine watchfulness. In royal gardens, they often wandered freely, scattering their cries like haunting little trumpets across the night. Sometimes they'd sit near the water's edge, tails fanned, as if they knew they were part of the spectacle. And goldfish, yes, tiny flashes of orange and white swimming in quiet ponds, living jewels that added shimmer to the stillness. Quirky little fact. During particularly extravagant garden parties, nobles would sprinkle rosewater into the fountains so that the mist would carry the scent across the entire courtyard. That's right, aromatic landscaping by air. You haven't lived until you've been gently sprayed in the face with floral perfume by a dancing fountain. You stand again and walk toward a row of citrus trees, their fruit gleaming like small moons. Oranges, lemons, even bitter Seville types, each one strategically placed to release their oils when touched by passing hands or wind. You run your fingers over one smooth rind. It's cold to the touch. You smile. In this place, even fruit is chilled by architectural intent. The trees are pruned with care, their trunks painted white near the base, not just for aesthetics, but to reflect the sun and ward off pests. Every decision here, even the ones that look like decoration, carries purpose. You pass beneath a trellis covered in sleeping wisteria. The blooms are closed now, their perfume faint. Earlier, they were probably buzzing with bees. Now, they hang like tiny lanterns waiting for a cue that won't come until dawn. And then you hear it. A soft rustle, a rhythm, a distant creak of a wooden wheel. You follow the sound down a narrow gravel path, where the moonlight flickers through tall hedges. Eventually, you come to the edge of the garden, where a large stone structure rises like the bones of a once splendid pavilion. In the center of it stands a sakina, an ancient water wheel. It turns slowly, almost reluctantly, fed by a channel from the cannet. The water slaps gently against its paddles as the wheel lifts it up, then spills it over into a long flume that vanishes into shadow. The wheel is operated by hand, though tonight it turns on its own, creaking softly in the night breeze, like it remembers being useful. These water wheels once served both practical and poetic functions. They lifted water for irrigation, yes, but they also made sound. Not music exactly, but rhythm, a heartbeat for the garden. Some wheels had hollow paddles designed to whistle as they turned. Others dropped water deliberately onto stone to create a constant, meditative plunk that echoed like a metronome through the foliage. Historians still debate whether these sounds were meant to replicate nature or replace it. But in this space, it doesn't feel like imitation. It feels like collaboration. The wheel turns, the water flows, the air moves, the stars blink, and you somehow are part of that rhythm. You find a low bench beneath a cypress and sit again. This is your third or fourth bench tonight, and each one has felt different. This one feels final. Not the end of the garden, but the beginning of something slower. You exhale and listen to the creak of the wheel, the trickle of water, the distant rustle of leaves. And for the first time in a long while, you don't feel the need to speak or move or even think too much. You just sit. You just are. The garden doesn't sleep, but it does rest. That's something you begin to understand as you sit beneath the cypress tree. Your hands resting in your lap, your eyes half-lidded. The water wheel continues its slow, methodical turning in the background. It's a rhythm you've come to rely on now, like a clock that tells no time but reminds you that moments are passing. You rise once more and follow a new path, one lined with marble slabs, their edges smoothed by centuries of sandals. The temperature has dropped another degree. The air has the feel of midnight. Somewhere overhead, an owl hoots once, then falls silent again. You wonder what it's seen. This part of the garden is different. It's not just older, it's more intentional. You can feel it. The layout tightens. The walls are higher. The tiles beneath your feet are etched with verses in Farsi script, now dulled by time. It feels ceremonial, like stepping into a chapter of a book you weren't sure you were meant to read yet. This is the heart of the garden, the sacred core, and at its center stands something remarkable. A domed pavilion, small, octagonal, and open on all sides. A single fountain bubbles at its base, feeding a circular channel that spirals outward. The sound here is layered. Stone, water, air, silence. You step into the pavilion and stand beneath the dome. Look up. The ceiling is painted deep blue, with gold stars and flowing vines. It's faded now, but enough remains to give you a glimpse of what once was. A canopy of sky, mirrored below by the water that circles your feet. The heavens above, the garden below. Order, reflection, harmony. This was once a space for scholars, mystics, and poets. Not to lecture, but to listen. The acoustics of the dome carry even a whisper across the entire structure. You try it, just a soft breath. And yes, it echoes. Not loudly, but with a delicate shimmer, like the space is replying. Historians still argue whether these pavilions were designed for ritual prayer or poetic contemplation. Some claim they were astronomical observatories in disguise. Others say they were built simply to remind us that beauty is enough reason. Whatever the intent, the feeling is the same. This space matters. You sit cross-legged near the fountain and let your fingers trail in the cool water. The channel spins it gently outward like a slow galaxy. The current is steady, purposeful. And yet there's no rush. The water's going somewhere, but not fast. A small inscription near the base of the fountain catches your eye. It's barely legible now, but you make out part of it. Something about the breath of trees and the patience of stone. A line of poetry, perhaps, or a fragment of someone's philosophy etched into tile and left behind for nights like this one. You lean back and feel the coolness of the stone beneath you. Your body folds into the shape of rest almost instinctively, and for a long time you just are. When you do rise again, the sky has deepened even more. The stars are clearer now, sharper. The constellations begin to show themselves one by one, Orion, Cassiopeia, the Bear. You think back to the early garden astronomers who stood in this exact spot, charting the heavens not with apps or machines, but with calm and careful eyes. You follow a path leading out of the pavilion, curving gently to the right, where a corridor of trees lines the route like silent sentinels. The branches above are woven tight, forming a tunnel of green turned silver under moonlight. Beneath your feet, the gravel crunches just enough to mark your progress, but not enough to disturb the quiet. Along the wall to your left, you notice a series of alcoves, shallow niches carved into the brick. Each holds a different item. One has an old terracotta vase, its surface cracked but still proud. Another holds a polished stone shaped like a lotus. A third contains only a dried rose, pressed flat, fragile as breath. These aren't relics. They're offerings, or maybe just memories, left behind not to be kept but to be felt. Quirky detail for this moonlit walk. Some Persian gardens were built with listening spots, places where sound was intentionally designed. A single corner might amplify bird calls. A basin might echo footsteps. Certain walls would bounce the sound of falling water in perfect rhythm. It wasn't just about what you saw. It was what you heard and how you heard yourself within it. You stop at one such spot now. A curve in the wall where even your softest breath comes back to you, slowed and rounded. You whisper a single word, anything at all, and listen as it comes back transformed. Not louder, not stronger, just gentler, like the garden is whispering it back to you with understanding. You move forward once more, past a low pergola covered in climbing white flowers that only bloom at night. Their petals glow faintly, catching the starlight like mirrors. Moths hover near them, wings twitching, undecided. The air smells like sleep, cool, fragrant, weighted with stillness. And now, at the far end of the path, you see another pool. This one long, narrow, and framed by flame-lit lanterns. It reflects not just the stars above, but the trees, the tiles, the walls, and you. You kneel beside it. Your face ripples in the surface. Your breath fogs the reflection. And for a moment, just a moment, it feels like the garden is looking back. Not at your clothes, or your posture, or your thoughts, but at your stillness, and approving. The long reflecting pool behind you now, you turn left, where the path narrows again, bordered by low stone walls lined with flowering herbs. The smell hits you first. Rosemary, mint, thyme. Faint but distinct, earthy and sharp, like something ancient just exhaled. You slow your pace instinctively. The garden has trained you to do that, rewarding your patience with scent, shade, and sound. Every corner invites you to notice more by doing less. And then you spot them. Two gardeners, side by side, trimming the edges of a lavender hedge. Their movements are nearly synchronized, not rushed, not idle. One snips with small iron shears, the other gathers the cut stems into neat bundles. They work without speaking, but with the easy choreography of people who have done this together for years, or perhaps decades. You pause, watching them. They nod in your direction, faint smiles barely visible beneath their linen veils. You smile back and continue along the path, the lavender brushing against your ankles like an affectionate cat. Somewhere overhead, a fig drops from a branch and lands with a soft thud. No one jumps. The garden accepts all its sounds. You arrive now in a space that feels slightly different. Wider, more open to the sky. A circular courtyard, centered by a stone platform raised slightly above the rest. On it, low cushions and rugs form a ring, and beyond them, tall torches stand guard. A few are still lit, flickering like tired dancers, casting amber shadows across the ground. This is a gathering space. At the far end, a woman stands alone, cloaked in indigo fabric that seems to melt into the night. Her hands are tucked calmly before her. She speaks, slowly, carefully, not chanting, not singing, just speaking. A story, perhaps, or a lesson, or something in between. You can't quite catch all the words, but the rhythm pulls you in. You take a place on the edge of the circle and listen. Her voice blends into the sound of the water wheel in the distance, and the faint sigh of trees. It's less about content now and more about cadence. You feel calmer with every sentence. She's talking about gardens. That much is clear. But not just this garden, all gardens. The first one, the lost ones, the ones we carry in our minds and memories. She says something about how we plant things we'll never see grow. How sometimes tending is more important than harvesting. And you get it. You're not here for fruit. You're here for stillness. Historians still argue whether these garden gatherings were educational or ritualistic. Some believe they were informal philosophy sessions. Others claim they were mystical initiations disguised as conversation. The truth, most likely, is both. These spaces blurred the line between intellect and spirit, between study and serenity. Quirky aside, some Persian philosophers believed that the garden was the only human-made thing that could rival the stars. Not palaces, not paintings, gardens, because only the garden combined nature, intention, beauty, and silence. It didn't imitate heaven, it cooperated with it. You shift your posture slightly on the rug. It's embroidered with vines and blossoms, a worn corner revealing the hands that made it. Everything here carries human fingerprints, from the careful carving of a water spout to the rhythm of pomegranate branches trained along a wall. You are surrounded not just by plants, but by choices. After the woman finishes speaking, she bows her head and quietly steps away. No applause, no exit music, just a shared silence. The others rise and drift away in pairs or alone, their footsteps barely audible on the stone. You remain seated. Above, the stars have shifted again. A few clouds drift lazily across the sky, half-hearted in their intent. The moon is a soft curve now, like a ladle dipping silver light into the garden. You feel its weight across your shoulders, not heavy, but present. You look down and realize the circle of rugs and cushions is arranged like a flower. You are sitting on one of its petals. You smile. Another path opens beyond the circle, less formal, lined with wildflowers and tall grasses that sway freely. This part of the garden is allowed to roam a little more. Less geometry, more grace. You walk slowly, letting your fingers skim along the tops of tall fennel and nodding chamomile. The bees have gone. The moths remain. A few lanterns are still lit, but most have burned down to smoldering wicks. Their holders glow faintly, releasing the last of their warmth into the cool air. It feels like the garden is putting itself to bed. Even the sounds have softened. The water is quieter, the trees more still, the air denser. And you, well, you've become slower too. Your breath is deeper, your thoughts more hushed. You didn't come here looking for anything, not really. But you found something anyway, a kind of listening you forgot you knew how to do. A silence that feels full, not empty. At the far end of the wild path, you see a small stone archway, simple, elegant, and open. Beyond it, a slope leads up into olive groves, and the stars shimmer a little brighter in that direction. It's not the end of the garden, but it might be the beginning of a memory. You take one last look behind you. The courtyard, the pool, the flickering torches. The walls, the vines, the whispering trees. The silence. And then, gently, you turn and walk into the dark. The olive grove receives you like an old friend. Quiet, gnarled, and utterly unbothered by time. The trunks are twisted, weathered into postures that suggest ancient gossip, their roots pushing up through the soil like knuckles. You walk slowly among them. The moonlight filters through the silver-green leaves, painting flickers of light and shadow across the ground. The earth here feels different, drier, chalkier, with the soft crunch of old leaves underfoot. You pause beside one tree and run your hand across its bark. It's rough but not sharp, textured, real. A reminder that paradise doesn't need to be polished. Sometimes it just needs to endure. These olive trees are old, centuries, maybe even more. Some say Persian olive groves like this one were cultivated with the same patience as the gardens below. Not for immediate reward, but for continuity. A tree planted now might not bear meaningful fruit for years. And yet they planted anyway, because someone would eat those olives. Someone would press that oil. Someone would remember. You keep walking. The grove thins out as the slope begins to rise. You're climbing now, gently, almost without noticing. The air gets crisper. The smells shift. Less floral, more mineral. Stone. Dry grass. The scent of heat that's left for the day but hasn't quite vanished. Ahead, you see a low terrace, another level in this layered garden world. A small stone staircase invites you upward. You take it slowly, one step at a time, the worn edges familiar under your feet. No railing, just balance and trust. At the top is something unexpected. A long, narrow platform lined with low walls and open to the sky. It's not a garden in the traditional sense. No trees, no pools, but it feels like one. The floor is tiled in faded patterns. Geometric, floral, winding like vines across the stone. And at the center is a single, wide basin filled with dark, still water. You approach it, and there you are, reflected. The stars behind you, the trees around you, the soft lines of your face in low light. You don't look tired, even though you've walked for what feels like hours. You look centered. This is the observatory garden. A space not for growing things, but for witnessing them, for watching, for aligning yourself with the sky. In the old days, scholars might have come here with astrolabes or scrolls, charting the position of Venus or noting the eclipse of a distant moon. Not to control the heavens, just to understand them. Historians still argue whether these observatory gardens were spiritual or scientific in nature. But here, the distinction blurs. The stars don't care why you're watching them. They just shine. Quirky aside, some Persian gardens were laid out according to celestial patterns, aligned with solstices, or with constellations visible during key planting seasons. There's evidence that certain flower beds mirrored the sky above, like the garden itself was trying to speak the language of the cosmos. You wonder if this one does too. You lie down on a smooth section of tile near the basin. It's cool against your back. The sky stretches above you in silent brilliance. The longer you watch, the more you see. Not just the brightest stars, but the faint ones behind them. Layers, depth, infinite slowness. A breeze moves through, higher here, thinner, but clean. It smells of stone, dust, and a distant memory of lemon. Somewhere below, the garden continues breathing, but up here it's just you and the sky. You count stars, or try to. You lose track. You smile, and then a rustle, not threatening, just present. You sit up and see an old man in a loose robe walking the far edge of the terrace. He carries no lantern, just a staff. He doesn't speak. He doesn't need to. He simply nods as he passes and continues his slow walk along the wall. A keeper of stars. Or maybe just another visitor who couldn't sleep. You remain seated. The basin beside you reflects the sky so perfectly it's hard to tell which way is up. It feels as though, if you dipped your hand into the water, you might touch a cloud. The old man reaches the end of the wall and vanishes down a stairwell. Silence returns. You stay, not because you must, but because there is nothing else more pressing than this moment. The breeze, the stars, the deep breath you didn't know you needed. Eventually, you rise from the terrace. Not with reluctance, but with ease. Like waking from a dream you're allowed to carry with you. The stone is still cool beneath your hands as you push up, brushing off your palms, leaving faint impressions in dust older than most countries. You take one last glance at the reflection pool, where the stars shimmer quietly on the surface. The sky has turned deeper now, ink blue, almost black. Still, the garden pulses softly below, its silence alive and listening. The path down is gentle, winding through olive groves and past low fig trees now folded into themselves, their branches resting as though even they are nodding off. You follow a curved stairway into a lower courtyard. This one smaller, more intimate. Its stone walls close in and warm from the heat of the day. It feels like you've returned indoors, even though the sky still floats above you. At the far end of the courtyard, you find something unexpected. A doorway. It's not grand, just a wooden arch set into stone, its top carved with a simple motif of vines. The door is open. Inside is a carcane, a working space. You step in and discover a small room filled with tools, baskets, hanging herbs, clay pots. A mortar and pestle sits at the center, flanked by dried saffron strands and neat bundles of thyme and mint. This is where the garden becomes remedy. You breathe in. The room smells like medicine, but not the sterile kind. This is warmth, tradition, usefulness. You run a finger along the edge of a wooden shelf, passing small jars labeled in delicate calligraphy. Rose water, sumac, pomegranate molasses, lavender oil. Each one is a product of the space outside, bottled, preserved, offered. Persian gardens weren't just spiritual sanctuaries. They were practical ones. The fruits and herbs grown in those symmetrical beds were used in daily life. In cooking, in healing, in rituals. The garden wasn't a background, it was a provider. You reach for a dried quince slice and lift it to your nose. It's tart, bright, alive even in this form. Imagine chewing it after a long day of sun and dust, or steeping it in water to make a tonic for a sore throat. It isn't glamorous, but it's real. And in the world that built this garden, reality and beauty didn't compete. They danced. You step back out into the courtyard and find a narrow bench carved into the wall, shaded by an overhead vine. You sit. The wall behind you is still warm. Feels good, like leaning into a memory. A soft clinking sound nearby draws your attention. A woman kneels beside a shallow basin, rinsing linen cloths. The water sparkles in the lamplight. She works slowly, deliberately, folding each one and setting it on a woven mat to dry. She sees you but doesn't speak, just nods. That's all this moment needs. You look around and notice the walls here are painted, not in vivid color, but soft ochre, the pigment likely made from garden earth. Faint floral designs run along the edges. Cypress trees, birds, a few stylized flowers that spiral inward like the garden's own geometry. It's subtle, almost invisible at first. But once you notice, you see the care. Someone once stood here with a brush and steady hands and thought, "This matters." Quirky detail for tonight's reflection. Persian gardeners were also artists. In fact, there was often no separation between the two roles. Those who tended the plants also tended the patterns. The layout of the garden, the pruning of branches, the carving of basins, all considered forms of design. Craft and cultivation were one. You rise again, your joints moving more slowly now. Not from fatigue, but from the way peace has begun to root itself in your limbs. You walk down a final corridor lined with low alcoves, each holding something different. A lantern, a clay bowl, a folded piece of fabric, maybe a forgotten scarf or prayer cloth, a piece of dried bark etched with a name. These are not exhibits. They're remnants, traces of people who once paused here the way you're pausing now. The garden holds them all gently. You turn the corner and step back into open air. The sky is massive again. The walls fall away. You are back in the lower garden, the first space you entered so many sections ago, now changed not in structure, but in the way it receives you. You are softer, slower. The silence feels deeper now, not because it grew, but because you did. The canal you first crossed still trickles along. The water, seemingly unchanged, still follows its gentle course between stone banks. You watch it for a long moment. It doesn't rush. It just flows. You kneel and dip your fingers into the channel. Cool, familiar, alive. And then, rising from the silence, you hear the faintest chime. A bell, maybe, or the edge of a bronze bowl struck gently with a wooden rod. One note, then nothing. It's not a summons. It's a signal. The garden's way of saying, "You've arrived." The sound of the chime still lingers as you stand there, your fingertips dripping gently into the canal. It wasn't loud, but it settled into your chest like a soft command. Be still, be here, be now. You dry your hands on your robes, or your sleeves, or whatever it is your dream self is wearing at this point, and begin walking again, this time without a destination. The garden will take you where it wants. And tonight, it seems to want you to rest beneath the cypress trees. You drift toward a grove of them, tall, narrow, their silhouettes like green shadows against the indigo sky. They rise like sentinels, unbothered by time or weather, stretching upward as if trying to reach the very stars they reflect in the pools below. The air beneath them is cooler. Still, it's the hush of a chapel, but with bark and root instead of altar and stone. The ground here is soft with pine needles. You don't walk so much as sink, just a little, like the earth is giving way to welcome you. And then you see it. A small stone platform in the very center of the grove, circular, raised slightly, edged with trimmed lavender bushes and 4 squat stools carved from old cedar trunks. You approach, sit on one of the stools, and rest your hands on your knees. This is a listening place. Not for music, not even for water, but for wind, and for time. A breeze threads its way through the cypress branches, and the trees respond, not with creaking or rustling, but with the soft, papery sigh of 1,000 green fingers brushing against each other. It's not a voice, but it speaks. Persian poets often described cypress trees as the lovers of silence. Tall, proud, rooted but yearning. Their image appears in countless verses, often as metaphors for grace, loyalty, or unbending resolve. Some historians argue that their presence in every noble garden was political. a symbol of strength. Others say it was aesthetic. But if you sit here long enough, you realize it's probably neither. The cypress is not here to say anything. It's here to be, and that's enough. A moth drifts across your line of sight and disappears into the shadows. Somewhere far off, a water wheel turns once, groaning slightly under the night's damp weight. Closer, a fig drops to the earth. No one hears it but you. You lie back against the platform and look straight up. The branches above you make a rough mandala of black lines and star points, a constellation framed by wood and leaf. You think about how long these trees have stood here, how many seasons they've held the snow, felt the dust storms, welcomed the pollen-laden breeze, and you wonder how many people have rested beneath them. Gardeners, scholars, lovers, soldiers, children. Did they think about the future when they sat here? Did they try to hold onto the moment, or let it pass like breath through needles? A cypress cone drops near your shoulder and rolls once before settling. You pick it up. The small, tough, perfectly formed, like a green granade of potential. Inside, dozens of seeds, waiting, patient. Quirky aside, in some ancient Persian rituals, cypress seeds were carried by travelers across deserts, sewn into the hems of garments or tucked into satchels, not for food, not for trade, but in case they found a place worthy of planting. A gift for a future they would never see. Legacy by sapling. You run your fingers along the cone's edge, feeling the ridges and cracks. Feels like time. Not a clock, but the tactile memory of seasons. You place the cone beside you on the stone and sit upright again. The grove has darkened further, the stars growing brighter in contrast. You breathe in through your nose. The scent is earthy, dry, faintly sweet, a mixture of cedar, crushed leaves, and lavender. And something else, something human, because someone has been here recently. A tiny clay cup sits near the edge of the platform. Inside it, the remnants of rosewater, still fragrant, still cool. You lift it to your nose, inhale, and set it down again. You don't need to taste it. The scent is enough. You realize then that this isn't a forgotten part of the garden. It's a place people return to quietly, deliberately, not for entertainment, but for centering, for rerouting. You close your eyes, and the garden does what it's been doing all night. It holds you, not in arms, not with words, but with presence. A nearby tree creaks gently in the wind. Not a warning, not fatigue, just a reminder that it's alive, that it hears you, that it's listening too. And so you sit, not searching, not seeking, just sitting and breathing, because here, beneath the cypress, that's all you're ever asked to do. By now, the garden feels like a part of your body, a soft organ around your spirit, pulsing with silence instead of blood. Each breath feels borrowed from a deeper well, one dug long before you were born and refilled by every tree, every stream, every sleepless visitor who ever walked these paths before you. You rise slowly from the cypress grove, careful not to disturb the pine needles or the cone you left behind. It stays where it landed, like a little promise tucked into the earth. You step gently back onto the path, your footfalls feather-light, as though the stones themselves have grown tender with the night. The garden feels quieter now, not emptier, but settled. Even the water seems to be moving more slowly, like everything is in agreement that this moment, right here, should stretch itself just a bit longer. You follow a winding path that curves away from the grove and into a smaller quadrant, rectangular, hedged tightly, with raised beds and narrow walkways. The soil here smells richer, darker. You're back in one of the oldest corners, the gardener's garden, the working beds, the ones that grow roots instead of ideas. You kneel beside a patch of herbs, chervil, perhaps, or savory. Hard to tell in the low light. They're arranged in tidy rows, punctuated by short wooden signs written in hand-painted script, now faded to sepia. You run a finger through the soil. It's cool, damp. You imagine the gardener here earlier today, barefoot, bent at the waist, humming something old while thinning seedlings with practiced fingers. A low clay wall separates the herbs from a narrow bed of carrots, the tops soft and feathery in the breeze. Further on, onions, radishes, fennel, all arranged not by convenience but by consideration: what feeds the soil, what follows the season, what shares water wisely. Companion planting isn't modern wisdom. It's ancient courtesy. Quirky little fact: some Persian garden texts recorded dream gardening, the practice of planting according to dreams. A vision of a pomegranate tree heavy with fruit, time to plant. A dream of dried roots, don't sow yet. It wasn't superstition. It was sensitivity. Listening to the land not just with logic, but with intuition. You walk slowly to the other side of the garden bed, where a narrow brick aqueduct carries water between rows. You crouch to look. The water is no more than a whisper now, but it moves cleanly, faithfully, in and out, nourishing in silence. Then, to your left, you spot something strange. A low stone door, barely waist-high, half covered in ivy. You hadn't noticed it before. It looks almost secret, like a mistake or a memory. But the handle is polished smooth. Someone uses it. You duck slightly and enter. And suddenly, the garden changes again. You're in an underground room, cool, echoing, lit by small oil lamps set into the walls. The walls are lined with clay pots, some sealed, some open. Shelves run from floor to ceiling, filled with tools, dried herbs, scrolls, even a few small wooden tablets etched with diagrams. This is no mere cellar. This is a garden memory room, a place where the work of seasons is kept, where seeds are stored and sorted by generation, where weather records are etched in wax, where many someones have written down what grew, what failed, what bloomed early, what rotted late. You walk slowly between the shelves. One scroll reads, rose, white, second terrace, too much wind. Another says, apricot, died of root heat. Do not plant near stone wall again. There are notes like these stretching back decades, maybe centuries, in neat script, sometimes scribbled, sometimes crossed out, always honest. You sit on a wooden stool beside a small writing table. A worn brush rests in a dish. There is ink, a single sheet of parchment. No one is here, but you are. You pick up the brush. You don't write anything profound. You don't quote a poet. You just write one line. Sat beneath the cypress and remembered how to breathe. You place it gently in the pile with the others. It belongs here now. You step out from the low stone door, back into the air. The night is shifting again. Not fading, but deepening. The final layer. You can feel it. The breeze is steady now. Not tentative. Not hesitant. Just full. You walk back toward the center of the garden. The space with the four quadrants, the intersecting canals, the wide reflecting pool. It's exactly as you left it, yet somehow more still. The lamps are nearly out. The birds have fallen silent. The moon, now low in the sky, casts long shadows that reach like arms across the water. You sit at the pool's edge. Your reflection waits for you. You lean down. It's quiet. And just as you did before, at the beginning you touch the water. Only now you don't need it to cool you or wake you or guide you. You're already there. You're still sitting by the pool, your fingers rippling the surface, when the breeze shifts again. Cooler now, steady, as if even the garden is breathing from a deeper place. You withdraw your hand, letting the water settle, and watch your reflection reform. The face that looks back is familiar, but quieter, less urgent, worn in the way a favorite coat fits better after years of weather. The canal beside you gurgles softly, and as your ears tune into it, you realize there's more than water here. There's sound, not just incidental splashes, but music. Not music made by humans, but music sculpted by design. You follow the flow toward a corner of the garden where water spills into a tiered fountain. But this isn't a loud, spraying kind of fountain. This one whispers. Its tiers are flat bowls carved in stone, stacked precisely so that the water falls from lip to lip with careful restraint. The tones vary, one pitch deeper, another higher. You sit beside it, and with time you begin to hear it. A scale, pattern, notes. This is flow music. In Persian garden design, water was not only for irrigation or beauty, it was a sonic element. The way it ran, splashed, dripped, and echoed was chosen, crafted, tuned. Water became a musician. The architect became its composer. You lie back on a cushion left near the base of the fountain and close your eyes. The sound surrounds you, each droplet like a chime, each stream like a quiet chord. It's not random. It's not mechanical. It's emotional. A slow lullaby in liquid form. Historians still argue whether Persian fountains were tuned deliberately to mimic instruments, or if the similarities are coincidental. But here, in this moment, you'd argue in favor of genius. The sound is too intentional, too emotionally accurate. A splash when you feel joy. A drip when you feel alone. A pause that feels like a held breath. You sit back up and walk further along the canal, where the water narrows into slender grooves cut into marble. The grooves zigzag slightly, changing direction and height. The water follows, obedient and clever, and where it bends abruptly, it splashes against the sides and emits sharp, crystal tones. These were the sounding tiles. Gardeners and builders once used them as mood setters. Want something calming? Smooth channels. Want something festive? At corners. The water will take care of the rest. And it wasn't just the water that played. The entire garden was designed to sound a certain way. The crunch of gravel underfoot. The rustle of leaves in raised beds. The breeze filtered through cypress branches, creating soft, fibrous rhythms overhead. Everything contributed. Everything was part of the score. Quirky historical detail. Some elite gardens employed garden listeners. People trained not to tend plants, but to tend silence. If a part of the garden felt too quiet or too noisy, they would adjust, open a channel, close a gate, change the path of water, plant sound-dampening bushes. Garden as orchestra. Listener as conductor. You follow a short stairway to a covered alcove, where a basin sits half in shadow. Water pours into it not from above, but from within. A hidden pipe directs it upward in a slow, steady arc that bends and falls like a question. The sound here is different again. Muffled. Intimate. You realize the basin has been carved not just for shape, but for acoustics. Its stone walls round the notes like cupped hands around a flame. You sit beside it, letting the tones rise and fall. You whisper something, anything, and hear your voice bounce back softer, rounder. In here, even your breath has music. And then you hear another voice, not real, not present, but remembered. Poet, perhaps. Maybe Hafez. Maybe someone whose name was lost but whose words endured. In your mind, it goes something like, this water remembers the hand that shaped it. This silence remembers the song not sung. You stay a while longer, letting the water speak in its slow syllables. Nothing repeats exactly, nothing rushes, and nothing is wasted. Eventually, you rise, and as you return toward the main courtyard, your foot brushes a low ceramic bell half buried in the soil. Chimes faintly, not by design, just accident. But the note is perfect. You look down. The bell has no rope, no crack, just a soft layer of dust. You kneel and wipe it clean. Beneath the dust, a line of text in tiny script circles the rim. Do not fear the echo. It is your friend. You smile, and once again the garden says nothing, but it sings. You leave the whispering fountains behind, stepping back into the deeper paths of the garden, the ones where moonlight trickles through vine-covered trellises like spilled silver, and the air smells faintly of history. You notice now how different this part of the garden feels. The symmetry loosens. The lines blur. The geometry, the perfect squares, the careful quadrants, gives way to something more unruly. Still beautiful, but touched by time. You're in the part of the garden that wasn't planned. It grew anyway. Broken tiles line the paths here, half covered by creeping time. A wall stands cracked but still proud. Its plaster faded. Its mosaic hints barely visible beneath years of dust and wind. A basin sits dry. A pergola leans slightly, wrapped in vines that clearly weren't invited but decided to stay. And somehow, none of it feels abandoned. It feels defiant. Because here is a truth the garden never says aloud but always holds. Things fall apart. Fountains dry. Trees die. Walls crumble. But sometimes, even in ruin, there is something that grows. You pass under an old arch with one keystone missing, and beyond it lies a bed of wild roses. no longer groomed, no longer trimmed into polite bushes. They've spilled over the edge of their planter and now bloom in casual rebellion, scattering their petals like laughter across the stone. A single bee drifts past, confused but content. The scent is sharp, slightly dusty, unapologetically alive. This is the garden of after. You pause beside a weathered bench. It's cracked down the center, and one leg has been propped up with a flat stone. You sit carefully anyway. The view from here is imperfect, and also completely right. A crooked tree leans sideways toward the moon. Puddle reflects it. A toad makes a slow journey between two weeds. This place wasn't restored. It was allowed. Historians still argue whether these sections of Persian gardens were ever intentional, spaces left to grow wild, or simply neglected with dignity. Some believe they were designed to mimic wilderness within the framework of order. Others say they were inevitable, the slow undoing of man's grip on nature, allowed to remain as an honest footnote. But here's a thought. What if these parts weren't accidents? What if they were lessons? You rise again and approach a long wall near the edge of the garden. It's covered in climbing ivy and flanked by two narrow trees that seem to lean inward like they're whispering secrets to each other. A few bricks have fallen away near the base. Someone has placed them in a neat stack beside the path. No one's in a hurry to rebuild. The garden seems content to breathe around the wound. And then you notice something that stops you. Carved into the mortar between two stones, nearly invisible in the low light, are words. Faint, worn, but still legible. We planted even as they burned. You run your fingers over it. The groove is shallow, but the feeling is deep. Because the Persian garden, as elegant and symmetrical and serene as it is, has lived through fire, through war, through invasion, earthquakes, droughts, dynasties rising and crumbling like dust in a shaken basin. And yet, people kept planting. They kept digging canets, laying tile, pressing rose petals into copper pots. Not because they were naive, but because they believed in the act of creating beauty precisely when ugliness tried to prevail. Quirky historical footnote. After Mongol invasions in the 13th century devastated vast stretches of Persia, one of the first things rebuilt wasn't the palaces or markets. It was the gardens, royal and village alike. Not for power, not for wealth, but for healing, for hope. You sit at the edge of a broken fountain and imagine what the space looked like 100, 200 years ago. The channels flowing, the birds nesting, the gardeners laughing under trees now long gone. You imagine a time when someone sat right where you are and wondered if their garden would survive what came next. It did, and now here you are. You glance down. At your feet, half buried in dirt, is a shard of ceramic. You lift it. It's blue, with a corner of what was once a flower or a bird. It fits perfectly in your palm. Someone painted this by hand, fired it in a kiln, set it into a wall, and then time happened, and now it's yours, just for a moment. You set it gently back in the soil, like returning something borrowed. The air is shifting again. The stars above blink softly, and you feel the earth exhale. Not dramatically, not like an ending, just a sigh. The kind you give when something long, quiet, and meaningful is nearing its final note. You don't feel sad. You feel witnessed. Because even this, the ruin, the wear, the faded script, the cracked bench, is part of the garden's soul. It was never just about beauty. It was always about continuity. The stars are dimming now, not because they've vanished, but because the eastern sky has begun to pale. Just a little, a thread of soft gray-blue curling above the trees. Dawn is coming, slowly, gently, like a curtain lifting at the end of a quiet performance. You begin walking again, your feet tracing a path that's unfamiliar but feels inevitable. You pass between tall hedges, beneath arches still cloaked in sleep, and under low fig branches that stretch lazily overhead. The garden, too, is stirring. The silence hasn't disappeared. It's just changed shape. There's a kind of breath behind it now. A hush before birdsong. A readiness. And as you round the last bend, you see something strange. A wall, but not Persian. The tile work is different. The patterns unfamiliar. The The structure broader, heavier, with columns carved in a language this garden doesn't usually speak. And yet, it's here. You've arrived at the borrowed garden. Or rather, the part of this one that shared itself with the world. Because Persian gardens did not stay within their homeland. They traveled. They took root in other soils, adapted their angles, shifted their plants, but always carried their soul. India, Turkey, Spain, Egypt, even parts of Central Asia. Wherever Persian minds and hands went, gardens followed. You step into the space, a garden within the garden, and you recognize the differences immediately. The layout here is still symmetrical, still centered on water, but the materials have changed. The tile work is glazed in brighter colors: turquoise, saffron, sea green. The flowers carved into the stone have sharper petals, unfamiliar names. The scent in the air carries unfamiliar notes: cardamom, jasmine of another variety, maybe even frankincense. You pause beside a square pool. In it, the reflection of a dome. One you hadn't noticed before, floats, wavers. This mogul, clearly, imported, adapted, and yet it sits so naturally among the cypresses and vines that it feels native now. This is what Persian gardens became when they crossed borders. They weren't copied, they were interpreted, translated by architects and gardeners who understood the structure, but added their own dialects. In India, the Chahar Bagh became the gardens of the Taj Mahal: white marble, lotus pools, water channels aligned with mausoleums. In Spain, the Alhambra's courtyards echoed the Persian layout, but in Andalusian tones: intricate stucco, orange trees, fountains carved like lace. Quirky design note: in early modern France, royal gardeners tried to replicate the Persian layout, but misunderstood the water system completely. They built the symmetry, but without canets or natural flow, the gardens dried quickly. The form remained. The function was lost. A silent lesson in listening to the land. You walk slowly past a stone bench, different from the others you've seen tonight. This one is wider, set lower, meant to recline upon. A style imported, perhaps, but it's aged here, worn down by generations of rest. You sit. In front of you, a cluster of date palms rises like an orchestra warming up. Their fronds rattle faintly in the morning breeze. Beneath them, a scattering of pink oleander, not native to the earliest Persian gardens, but welcomed later, resilient, fragrant, bold. And there, by your foot, a small plaque, etched in several scripts: Farsi, Arabic, Sanskrit, even a smudge of Latin. The message is simple. Everywhere it goes, the garden remembers where it began. You run your finger across the letters, not because you need to read them again, but because they feel true. Persian gardens didn't impose themselves on the world. They offered themselves, and others accepted, modified, honored, and sometimes misunderstood. But the soul endured. You wander again, through a colonnade lined with shallow pools, where stepping stones form a path across the water. You cross them one by one, the stones slick beneath your feet. Each step a reminder that the path to paradise is always made in increments. And then, a surprise: music. Not from an instrument, not from a fountain, but from a group of sparrows that have suddenly burst into their morning chorus, as if someone gave them permission. They flutter across the hedges, calling to each other, shaking sleep from their wings. The sun is close now. The garden begins to shimmer, each dewdrop catching the first traces of light. The vines seem greener. The gravel paths glow faintly. The air smells sweeter, rose and dust and something like honey. You look around, and even in this foreign corner, even with its borrowed walls and adopted shapes, you feel the same pulse. Water, symmetry, shade, silence, song. It's different here, yes, but it's still garden, still Persian at its root, still meant for rest and wonder, and for those who walk it slowly. The light has finally arrived, not blinding or abrupt, but gentle, like the garden has chosen to wake up with you. The sky overhead is a soft, blooming gray, touched with streaks of peach and lavender. Birds now speak in full sentences. Leaves quiver, not with night wind, but with the early breath of day. Even the shadows have shifted. They stretch in reverse now, tucking themselves back into corners as the sun reaches over the walls. You return to the center, the heart of it all. The intersection of water channels, the four quadrants, the wide pool now rippling faintly with golden light. It's the same place you began your journey, and yet it's different. Or maybe it's you who has changed. You sit by the edge of the reflecting pool once more, in the same place where your fingers traced moonlight hours ago. Now, instead of stars, it reflects the sky, pale and waking. A dragonfly hovers above the surface, its wings catching the new light like slivers of glass. It lands briefly, then vanishes again into the morning. You breathe, and with that breath, you begin to feel the garden letting go of the night. The water channels flow more audibly now. The plants seem to lean ever so slightly toward the light. And high above, the cypresses stand like eternal scribes, writing the story of this space across the sky. You rise slowly, stretch. The stiffness in your joints is the good kind, the kind earned from stillness, not strain. A gardener appears in the distance, her figure small and slow-moving. She bends toward a bed of basil and begins her morning ritual. No fanfare, no greetings, just the quiet devotion of someone tending a space older than memory. You walk one final path, letting the stones remember your steps. The garden does not cling to you. It does not demand that you stay. It simply allows. A space, a silence, a moment of belonging that asks nothing and gives everything. And then, before you leave, you stop once more beneath the citrus tree. Its fruits are pale green and gold, still ripening. You reach up, not to pluck one, but to rest your hand against its cool, firm skin, a gesture of thanks. And in that stillness, you remember something, a fragment of a line, perhaps read long ago or whispered in this very space. A single tree in a quiet garden is louder than the armies of kings. You smile, not because it's dramatic, but because here it feels true. And as the garden begins to hum with day, small tasks, gentle footsteps, a broom sweeping softly in a distant corridor, you take your final steps past the outer wall. You look back once, not with sadness, but with reverence. And now let us slow everything down together. The sun is rising, but your breath stays slow. You've wandered through arches and alcoves, beneath vines and shadows, along tiled paths and under quiet trees. You've heard water sing, stone remember, and silence speak in ways no voice ever could. You've rested in the corners where others once rested. You've listened. You've touched history. You've touched yourself gently, patiently, without demand. And now let it all soften. Let the garden fold itself like a page turning in the wind, not closing, not ending, just drifting into the next quiet chapter. The channels still flow. The flowers still open. The breeze still moves across the pool. But you, for now, are still. Let your limbs grow heavier. Let your thoughts float. The sounds you remember, the peacocks, the water wheel, the flute, the whisper of rose petals falling, let them fade. Not disappear, but dissolve. Into comfort, into warmth. The garden remains, in all its forms, behind walls, in dreams, in faraway lands and borrowed patterns. But tonight, or this morning, or whatever space of time you occupy now, it became yours. And when you return to your day, or to your dreams, remember this. You don't need a gate or a passport or a key. You only need the stillness, the breath, the gentle decision to pause, and the willingness to walk slowly wherever you are. So rest now. The garden is still here, and it always will be.